One of the things that always intrigued me as a Resident Evil fan was when we first see Barry in Resident Evil 1 hand a lockpick to Jill Valentine and casually state that she's the master of unlocking. It actually begged the question, how could she be the master of unlocking if she's basically a cop? Now that's pretty strange considering the fact that being able to lockpick isn't a common skill that police officers tend to have. That's more in line with a thief that's ready to break and enter a building. And so that's what we're going to be discussing today. Why is Jill Valentine the master of unlocking? Well, to answer that question, we're going to have a look in Jill Valentine's past. Now, in the book, The Umbrella Conspiracy, written by S.D. Perry, by the way, if you haven't picked up or read that book, I highly recommend it since there's so many nuggets of information. I'll leave the Amazon link to it down below. But the book lets us know that Jill Valentine's father was actually a famous thief decades before the raccoon incident, until he got incarcerated. Now, his name was Dick Valentine. In fact, he was actually one of the best thieves in the business, according to the novel, and he was also teaching Jill to follow in his footsteps. And throughout the entirety of the book, we also receive several flashbacks of Jill remembering her training with her father. Now, these memories would prove beneficial and key to her survival in the mansion incident. One example of this is a flashback in page 119 of The Umbrella Conspiracy. Only fools accept the obvious and go no further. Use your brain, Jilly. Jill smiled a little, and it was her father talking, reminding her of the training she had had before the stars. One of her earliest memories was of hiding in the bushes outside the rickety old house in Massachusetts that her father had rented for them, studying the dark and empty windows as he explained how to properly case a prospect. Dick had made it into a game, teaching her over the next 10 years all the finer points of breaking and entering. Everything from how to remove panes of glass without damaging them to walking on stairs so that they didn't creak. And he'd also taught her again and again that every riddle had more than one answer. Now you might be wondering, why was Jill Valentine working for the stars if she had trained to be a thief her whole life? And why on earth would she be working in law enforcement of all places? Well, in page 33 of the novel, we get insight into the answer to the first question, and it would seem that Jill wasn't too keen on joining her dad in prison. Well, don't forget that you stood a good chance of ending up in prison if you hadn't changed occupations. And to answer the second question as to why Jill decided to join the stars rather than the standard raccoon police department is because she couldn't stand all of the hurdles that regular police officers had to go through, which would hinder her progress in an investigation. She had joined the stars because she couldn't stand the bullshit red tape that dominated so much of law enforcement. Or in other words, Jill really didn't like how officers had to follow so many rules and regulations. It would seem that Jill was more in the alley of getting things done, which is why stars seemed to have been a better option for her in the end. We also know from the book that STARS was actually a private organization that assisted local police stations during high-risk situations, making them very similar to SWAT, yet the major difference being that STARS was a private organization. The privately funded STARS organization was originally created to measure against cult-affiliated terrorism by a group of retired military officials and ex-field operatives from both the CIA and FBI, under the guidance of the NSDA, aka the National Security and Defense Agency. The group quickly expanded its services to include everything ranging from hostage negotiations to code breaking and riot control and working with local police agencies. So with this information, we can ascertain that what made the STARS organization different from being a police officer is that STARS seemed to care more about the person's skill set rather than the person's past. But it's also worth mentioning that each STARS member had to go through extensive psychological tests before joining the STARS. And we learn this information when Jill and Chris try to have a discussion in the helicopter ride about Jill's recently acquired information from Trent. Now, by the way, Trent was actually just a character that was made up for the book. So, yeah, if you don't know who Trent is, I highly recommend you read the book. But anyways, going back to what I was saying, we actually have Jill warn Chris of an alleged traitor in the STARS. Now, Chris goes on to state Jill, I know these people, and even if I didn't, the stars have psych profiles on every member, history checks, personal preferences. There's no way it could happen. So it's safe to say that working for the stars organization was completely different from working in the standard police station. Now, what's funny about Jill's experience with stars is that it would prove quite useful in co-founding the BSAA in the future, which was also a private organization when it first started. Well, if you guys enjoyed this video, then make sure to click this video if you want to know the hilarious way that Jill decided to solve the armor room puzzle in the book versus the way that she solves it in the games. By the way, I also wanted to let you guys know that I've made other Resident Evil lore videos, so don't forget to subscribe.